Have you ever wondered how close you've come to danger without even realizing it? At Enigma of the Unknown, we take you there, one terrifying story at a time. But before you settle in, be sure to like this video and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. Now, turn down the lights, wrap yourself in a warm blanket, and prepare for a chilling true tale. It was the middle of December, and a brutal cold front had swept through Northern California. I was on my way home for the holidays, driving through the Sierra Nevada mountains trying to beat the worst of the storm. The highways were packed with slow-moving cars, everyone cautious on the icy pavement. I had been on the road for hours, my fingers stiff against the wheel despite the heater blasting in my old Ford Escape. I hated driving in conditions like this. The black ice was everywhere, and the wind howled through the trees like a warning. I should have stuck to the main road, but I was impatient. I knew a backroad shortcut that could shave off at least 40 minutes. I had driven it before in the summer, a winding path through dense forests that most people avoided in winter. I told myself I could handle it, that I'd just take it slow. At first, it wasn't too bad. The snow-covered trees on either side of the road looked almost peaceful under the glow of my headlights. The road was narrow, but I knew its curves well enough to navigate them carefully. I turned down the radio, focusing on the road ahead. The occasional gust of wind sent flurries of snow swirling across my windshield, making it feel like I was driving through some endless frozen void. Then I hit the ice. It happened fast. 1 second I had control, and the next my tires lost traction. My stomach lurched as my car started to slide sideways. I gripped the wheel, trying to correct, but the road had other plans. The back end swung out, and suddenly I was spinning, the world outside a blur of white and darkness. I don't even remember the moment I left the road. I only remember the violent jolt as my car slammed into a shallow ditch, the impact snapping my head forward. The engine sputtered, then fell silent. For a few seconds, I just sat there, gripping the wheel, my breath coming in short, ragged gasps. I did a quick self-check. My head was throbbing, but I wasn't seriously hurt. The car seemed intact too. No smoke, no shattered glass, just stuck. I sighed, running a hand over my face. "Great job, idiot," I muttered to myself. Reaching for my phone, I checked for a signal. No service. Of course. This road was too remote and the storm was likely messing with the towers. I'd have to wait for another car to pass by and flag someone down for help. I turned on my hazard lights and stepped out into the cold. My boots crunched in the fresh snow as I surveyed my surroundings. That's when I saw it, the other car. Not far ahead, maybe 50 feet from where I had crashed, was an old truck. It sat half buried in the snow, angled awkwardly off the road. Its front end was crumpled, like it had collided with something hard. A wreck. Someone else must have lost control on the same patch of ice. For a moment I felt relief. I wasn't alone. Someone else had crashed too. Maybe they were still inside. Maybe they needed help. I grabbed my flashlight from the glove compartment and started toward the vehicle. The snow was deeper than I expected, and I had to tread carefully over the icy ground. As I got closer, I noticed something strange. The truck looked old. Not just beaten up, but aged. Like it had been sitting there for days, maybe weeks. The windows were frosted over, the tires half buried. If someone had crashed earlier that night, I'd expect footprints, some sign of movement, but there was nothing. I hesitated, suddenly uneasy. I knocked on the driver's side window. "Hello? You okay in there?" No answer. I tried the door. It creaked open, revealing an empty seat. No driver, no passenger. Just a layer of dust on the dashboard and an eerie silence. Something about it didn't feel right. My gut twisted. Where was the driver? Had they gone for help? If so, why weren't there any footprints? Then I heard it. Footsteps, crunching softly in the snow behind me. I froze. My breath hitched in my throat. The sound wasn't distant. It was close. Too close. Slowly, I turned my head. A man stood at the edge of the trees, just beyond the reach of my flashlight's beam. He was tall, dressed in tattered clothing that looked stiff from the cold. His face was pale, almost ghostly in the dim light, and his eyes were empty, hollow. He didn't move, he didn't speak, he just watched me. A chill ran down my spine, one that had nothing to do with the weather. "Hey," I called out, forcing my voice to stay steady. "Are you okay? Do you need help?" "Nothing." I swallowed hard, taking a step back. "Did you crash that truck? Are you hurt?" Still, he didn't answer. But then, he took a step forward, slow, deliberate. Something in my gut screamed at me to leave. I didn't know why, but every instinct in my body was telling me that this wasn't right. Then he spoke. His voice was low, raspy, like it hadn't been used in years. "Your car's warm, isn't it?" My blood ran cold. I took another step back. The man stepped forward. I didn't wait to see what he'd do next. I turned and bolted, slipping and sliding through the snow as I raced back to my car. I could hear him moving behind me. Not running, just walking. Steady, unhurried. I fumbled with the door handle, yanking it open and throwing myself inside. My hands were shaking as I slammed the lock down. For a terrifying moment, I thought my car wouldn't start. My breath came in panicked gasps as I twisted the key in the ignition. Then, salvation. A pair of headlights appeared down the road. Another car. The moment the approaching vehicle's lights swept over the road, the man was gone. Vanished. I didn't waste time. The second my engine roared to life, I threw the car into reverse and gunned it out of the ditch, my tires struggling for traction. I didn't stop until I reached a gas station miles away. My hands were still trembling as I told the attendant what had happened. He gave me a strange look and made a call to the local sheriff. When the authorities arrived, they investigated the scene. They found the wrecked truck, but according to the records, that vehicle had been reported abandoned 10 years ago. The original driver? Never found. If you're ever driving through the Sierra Nevada in the dead of winter, and you see a man standing by the trees, don't stop, don't speak, and whatever you do, don't let him get close. Stay safe out there, and remember, some things are waiting for the cold to bring you to them. If you've made it this far, you know that danger can lurk in the most unexpected places, especially in the dead of winter. But the story isn't over yet. If you're enjoying these chilling tales, be sure to like this video and subscribe for more unsettling encounters. Now, let's get back to the nightmare that unfolded on that lonely road in the Sierra Nevada. I sat in my car at that gas station for what felt like an hour, hands still gripping the steering wheel, trying to steady my breathing. The warm air from the vents blasted against my face, but I still felt cold. That man, the way he spoke, the way he moved. "Your car's warm, isn't it?" The words still echoed in my head, sending fresh chills down my spine. I told myself I was safe now. I had gotten away. The headlights from that passing car had scared him off, and I had made it out of that ditch before he could get any closer. But deep down, something felt unfinished. The gas station was nearly empty, just an old pickup parked by one of the pumps, its driver nowhere in sight. The fluorescent lights flickered above me, casting long, shaky shadows across the icy pavement. I glanced at my phone. Still no signal. I needed to report this. The guy at the counter was middle-aged, wearing a thick flannel over his hoodie, flipping through a newspaper like it was 1995. I stepped inside, my boots squeaking against the tile floor. The bell over the door jingled, and the man looked up. His face was lined with years of exhaustion, and the way he eyed me said he'd seen his fair share of weirdos passing through. "Everything okay, bud?" he asked. I opened my mouth, but the words felt stuck. Was I overreacting? Had I imagined it? No way. That man was real. There was someone back on the road, I finally managed to say. I crashed my car in a ditch, and there was this guy. He was just standing there watching me. He tried to take my car. The attendant's expression didn't change much, but something flickered in his eyes. He set the newspaper down and leaned on the counter. "Where?" "About 10 miles back, near an old wrecked truck. Looked like it had been abandoned for a while." The man's face hardened. He glanced past me, out the window, as if expecting someone to be standing right outside. "You should sit tight," he said. "I'll call the sheriff." I nodded and exhaled, feeling slightly relieved. Someone else needed to know about this. The man picked up the phone behind the counter and dialed. I tried to focus, but my thoughts were racing. Who was that man? Where had he come from? I had seen the wreck up close. There were no footprints, no signs of life around it. And yet, he had appeared out of nowhere. And then, there was what he said. "Your car's warm, isn't it?" Like he had been out there for a long time. Like he had been waiting. The clerk's voice broke through my thoughts. "Yeah, another one. Just had a guy come in saying he saw him back near the old wreck." I stiffened. "Another one?" The attendant caught my expression and turned his back slightly, lowering his voice. I only caught pieces of what he was saying. "Same spot, yeah." Still no sign of the truck driver. A knot twisted in my stomach. This wasn't the first time someone had seen that man. The clerk hung up, then sighed. He studied me for a moment, then finally said, "Sheriff's on his way." I swallowed. "Has this happened before?" The man hesitated, then he nodded. About 20 minutes later, a sheriff's cruiser pulled up outside. A heavy-set man in his late 50s stepped out, his breath clouding in the frigid air. He adjusted his belt and stomped inside, his boots tracking slush across the floor. "You the one who saw him?" he asked. I nodded. The sheriff exchanged a look with the clerk, then turned back to me. "Tell me exactly what happened." So I did. I told him everything. How I crashed, how I found the wrecked truck, how the man appeared out of nowhere and tried to take my car. The sheriff listened without interrupting. When I finished, he let out a long breath and rubbed his face. "That truck you saw," he said, "was reported abandoned 10 years ago." A shiver ran through me. The driver, a guy named David Langley, was never found. He went missing during a blizzard. Search teams combed the area for weeks, but no trace of him ever turned up. I shook my head. "But the man I saw wasn't." The sheriff held up a hand. "Yeah, I know." My throat went dry. "How many people have seen him?" I asked. The sheriff exhaled, staring at the counter like he was tired of carrying something heavy. "A few, and they all described the same thing. A man standing just beyond the trees, watching. Sometimes he speaks, sometimes he doesn't, but whenever someone gets too close..." He paused, shaking his head. "Whenever someone stops, they go missing." My chest tightened. "You got lucky," he said. The words barely registered. My mind was still stuck on what he had just told me. Others had seen him, and some of them never made it out. I didn't sleep that night. Even after I left the gas station, even after I checked into a cheap motel miles away, I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. I kept thinking about the wreck. How long had he been standing there, waiting in the cold? What would have happened if that other car hadn't driven by at the right moment? What if he's still out there, waiting for the next person to stop? The next day, I tried searching for information about David Langley. I found old articles, reports of his disappearance, interviews with family members who had lost hope, but there was one detail that made my blood run cold. A witness, one of the last people to see Langley before he disappeared, said that when they spoke to him on the road, he had been acting strangely, distant, like he was half frozen, half aware of where he was. And the last thing he had said before walking off into the woods, "My car's warm, isn't it?" If you're ever driving through the Sierra Nevada in the dead of winter and you see a man standing by the trees, don't stop, don't speak, and whatever you do, don't let him get close. Stay safe out there. And remember, some things are waiting for the cold to bring you to them. Before we continue, if you've been enjoying these chilling winter tales, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to Enigma of the Unknown. Now, let's return to the nightmare that unfolded on that desolate, frozen road in Northern California. I didn't sleep that night. Even though I was far away from the icy back road where I had encountered that man, if he was even human, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still watching me. The sheriff had left me with more questions than answers. Whenever someone stops, they go missing. I kept replaying his words in my mind. Who else had seen him? How many people had disappeared after stopping near that wreck? And then there was his voice. The way he had spoken, his hoarse, unnatural words. Your car's warm, isn't it? Like he wasn't just cold. Like he had been out there for years. I needed to know more. I wasn't the type to let something like this go. I'd spent years driving these back roads, always believing I was in control, that nothing could surprise me. But this was different. So the next morning, after a few restless hours of sleep in a cheap motel, I decided to dig deeper. I started at the local library. It was the only place I could think of that might have old news archives on file. The librarian, an older woman with thick glasses and a knitted sweater, gave me a curious glance when I asked about any missing persons cases near the Sierra Nevada highways. "Are you working on a story?" she asked, eyeing me over the rim of her glasses. I hesitated. "Something like that." She led me to a set of ancient-looking microfilm machines in the corner of the room. "Try looking around 2013, she suggested. That was the last big storm that caused a few disappearances. I thanked her and got to work. It didn't take long before I found something. A news article dated December 2013 in the local paper. Dated, "Langley reported missing after vehicle found abandoned near Sierra Nevada back road." I sat back in my chair, pulse quickening. Langley. That was the name the sheriff had mentioned. According to the article, David Langley had been driving home for the holidays when he called his wife saying he was taking a shortcut to avoid the storm. That was the last time anyone heard from him. His truck was found days later, half buried in the snow. There was no sign of him, no tracks leading away from the vehicle, just an empty driver's seat and an open door. I clicked through more articles. One reported that search teams had scoured the woods for weeks, but found nothing. Another mentioned a strange sighting a few years later. A trucker had claimed to see a figure standing just beyond the trees, near the abandoned truck. The details sent shivers down my spine. Every witness described the same thing. A tall, ragged man, unmoving, watching. A few had spoken to him, and every time he had said the exact same thing. "Your car's warm, isn't it?" I closed the files, my heart pounding. This wasn't just a ghost story. Something was still out there. I had to go back. I had to see the wreck again. The drive back to the shortcut felt longer this time. The weather had worsened overnight. Thick clouds loomed over the mountains, and the wind howled through the trees. Every mile closer sent another jolt of unease through my gut. By the time I reached the stretch of road where I had crashed, it was almost sunset. The sky had turned a deep shade of gray, the first hints of snow beginning to drift down. I pulled over. For a moment I just sat there, gripping the wheel, my breath coming in slow, measured gasps. Everything looked the same. The ditch where I had skidded off the road, the spot where the wreck had been, but something felt different. Then I noticed it. Footprints, leading from the woods to the side of the road. My stomach twisted into knots. They were fresh. Who the hell was out here? I reached into my glove box, pulling out the heavy-duty flashlight I kept for emergencies. My heart pounded as I stepped onto the frozen ground, the cold biting into my skin through my jacket. I followed the footprints. They led straight to the wreck. It was still there, rusted, covered in frost, just like before. But something was different this time. The driver's side door was open. I stepped closer, my breath coming out in visible puffs of air. The interior was still empty. But then I noticed something sitting on the driver's seat. A keychain, a small metal tag engraved with the name Langley. A wave of nausea hit me. I hadn't seen that there before. Someone had put it there. Then, footsteps. Behind me, I whipped around, flashlight shaking in my grip. A figure stood at the edge of the trees, not moving, watching. His skin was pale, his clothes, the same ones I had seen before, were stiff with ice. It was him, David Langley, but he was wrong. His mouth was slightly open, lips cracked as if he had been standing in the cold for years. His eyes were hollow, sunken in, like something had drained all the life from him. And then he spoke. "Your car's warm, isn't it?" The exact same words, the exact same unnatural voice. My body finally kicked into motion. I ran, slipping on the ice, scrambling toward my car. I didn't dare look back. I threw myself inside, slammed the door shut, and locked it. My hands fumbled for the keys. God, where were my damn keys? Then, a shadow passed by the passenger window. I barely choked back a scream. I twisted the keys in the ignition. The engine sputtered. No, not now. Not now. Your car's warm, isn't it? The voice was right outside my window. I turned my head. He was standing inches from the glass. His breath fogged up the window. His blackened fingers twitched as he slowly raised his hand. The engine roared to life. I didn't think. I didn't hesitate. I slammed my foot on the gas. The tires skidded, but I didn't care. I needed to get the hell out of there. As I sped down the road, my heart felt like it was about to explode. I forced myself not to look in the rearview mirror. I didn't want to see if he was still there. I didn't stop driving until I reached the first town I could find. I checked into another motel, locked the door, and sat on the bed for what felt like hours, shaking. I don't know what I saw out there. I don't know if it was David Langley or something that used to be him. All I know is this: something is still waiting on that road. And if you ever find yourself driving through the Sierra Nevada in the dead of winter, and you see a man standing by an old wreck, do not stop. Stay safe out there, and remember, some things are waiting for the cold to bring you to them. This story is a chilling reminder that some places hold onto the past, and not everything lost wants to stay forgotten. When traveling alone, especially in remote, wintry conditions, always trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, do not ignore it. Desolate roads and abandoned wrecks are not always empty, and stopping for the unknown can have consequences beyond understanding. Some mysteries are not meant to be solved, and some encounters should be left in the rearview mirror. Stay cautious, stay aware, and when the cold whispers, keep driving. Thank you for watching and supporting Enigma of the Unknown. Your engagement fuels our passion for bringing you the most chilling, true horror stories. If you enjoyed this tale, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more eerie encounters. Have a story of your own? Share it in the comments. We might just feature it in a future video. Stay safe, stay warm, and whatever you do, don't look back.